Welcome back to my channel, everyone. My name is Peace. I am a clinical mental health counselor based in Fargo. Today's video, I want to go over the 4 stages of forced migration and the trauma that may occur while going through it. What inspired this video is the amount of genocide, the amount of war that's going on all over the world right now. Genocide that's happening in Africa, in Europe, genocide that's happening in the Middle East, in Latin America. Honestly, it seems like the only place we're not seeing a lot of genocide, maybe I'm just not aware, is the US, but everywhere else, every other continent, they're going through it. And I kind of want to like share some knowledge on what I know about migration trauma, and also those who are going through, if they get a hold of my video, I want them to understand like things I can help alleviate it while you're in that process, right? But before I even start on the stages, I want to just talk about a little bit about my immigration journey and how I got to where I am now. So my my migration story is actually it honestly is a video of its own, but I'll dance it right here. I was born when war broke out. That's why I was named Peace. According to my mom, she had me in the back of a house around 12 a.m. at night while there was guns being fired all over. She had been in transit for immigration for about 15 years prior to me being born. She got pregnant with me during wartime and had me in the back of a house in the middle of the night. One lady helped her, and she said the reason why she named me Peace is because even though there was a lot of gunfires and shooting, I was just very, very calm when she had me. There was no crying. I was just still. And when she looked at me, she named me Peace. She actually had a different name for me, but Peace makes sense at the time. So I was born in transit, and I'll go over what in transit means. But for the first 10 years of my life, my family was in transit from one country to the next, seeking asylum. Again, I'll go over what that means when individuals are seeking asylum. But I spent the first 10 years of my developmental life basically just in a convoy with different family members trying to figure out where to live permanently. And by the grace of God, God arrested my grandma's heart. So when I was 9 years old, my grandma finally agreed to have us shipped out here to the U.S. because she had been here for like a lot of years prior to that. So in 2005, my family migrated to the US. I was 10 years old, and that was my first time starting formal education and getting like adjusted into just civilization overall. But prior to that, I lived in transit in different refugee camps, different countries. I'll go over more of that throughout the video, just explaining what that means and what that looks like for individuals who have fled the home country. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, or if you know friends, family members who are going through this, if you still have friends, family members who are displaced, who are being basically exiled from their home, please share this with them because I do want to leave some insight on what can help while still going through it. A lot of people don't have much resources, but it seems like a lot of people have access to the internet. So I want to actually put things out there that can help ease it. Yeah, so if this is something that sounds interesting, stick through. I'm going to go through the 4 stages of forced migration trauma and ways that as clinicians we can help individuals who've been through it. All right. So if you guys do see me looking down every now and then, it's because I do have all my research or my script in front of me, and I'm still pretty new to being a content creator. I usually speak directly from just what I know instead of just being scripted. So I'm gonna try my best to be more natural. But if it doesn't feel natural, that's why. So just bear with me as I'm going through. Okay. So like we all know, migration is it's a natural part of humans' existence. Since the beginning of time, people have migrated from one place to the next, whether that's for spice, for livestock, just to learn new things. Even I recently migrated, actually. I migrated 2 years ago. I lived in Texas. I moved there to gain more insight, to work with immigrants specifically, and just to learn more. Living in Fargo didn't have as much of clinicians who were specialized in what I'm interested in. So I had to migrate to Texas to meet other clinicians who's been doing this for a while. And that was not traumatic at all, right? Because I had a plan, I have family member support, I have people there while when I got there to help me I'll get settled in there. So again, we migrate all the time, right? But what I want to cover in this video is forced migration. When people are asked to leave, when people are forced out of their homes, not all migration results in trauma, but trauma can occur when the migration is forced. Okay? And in her new book, Dr. Rosemary Perez, honestly, shout out to Dr. Perez because she's one of the few clinicians and few researchers out there who's been doing the work since the 90s. So I do want to shout her out. She came up with the four stages of migration trauma. And she cited basically there's a high risk of traumatic experiences for individual based on these four stages, right? The first stage is pre-migration trauma. This is what happens that makes people leave their home. What causes people to leave their house? For my family, it's war, civil war. I'm from Liberia, West Africa. West Liberia has been having civil war since, honestly, since like most of me and my siblings were born. But from according to my grandma, civil war been around since 1980s. So that have forced a lot of people to relocate back to Cote d'Ivoire, relocate to Ghana, relocate to like Nigeria, relocate to all the other places in West Africa. And because of that, a lot of Liberians actually have asylum in the U.S. because this war been going on for a while. So pre-migration trauma is the trauma that occurs that forces family members to leave their home, that causes people to be displaced. Now, go into more detail what that is. So, contrary to a lot of popular beliefs in the US, oftentimes immigrants avoid migrating. A lot of people don't want to leave their home. They don't want to be rushed out of their home country naturally, right? It's something that leads them to leave their home. For example, pre-migration trauma since the 40s have included civil war in, again, Liberia, Somalia. There's civil war in Sudan, Ethiopia, Congo, and Rwanda. And a lot of the immigrants here in Fargo are from all these countries I'm listing. These are my predominant clients I'm working. Not a cakewalk either for these immigrants. You know what I mean? As we're seeing right now, just going Al Jazeera, a lot of immigrants don't have access to the U.S. as a lot of people think. We just assume when war breaks out, the government runs to the aid of the people and say, okay, you can come here. But it takes so much coordination and so much planning before immigrants actually are able to come to the U.S., which takes me to the second stage of migration, which is trauma while in transit. So after you're forced, that trauma have happened, whether that's from war or natural disaster. Now you're just in transit because they're figuring out what they should do next, and that takes a while, right? Like over the last decades, researchers have done a great job of like linking the migration process to a high level of stress. A lot of researchers are aware that war gonna cause trauma, and war and conflict is gonna cause trauma. But what they miss is the amount of trauma that occur after that war, the amount of trauma that occur for the individuals when they're in transit searching for a new place to stay. For example, lack of food and shelter. For example, loss of loved one and identity. In order for you to relocate, your identity is going to be stripped a lot of many times. And I will have another video on that specific concept of lost identity because that's another whole ball game that clinicians work with clients on. Another thing that happened to client individuals while they're in transit is forced sexual violence, whether that's through incest or just from other people who are in that refugee camp or who are in transit with you. A lot of individuals have expressed like overwhelmingly being forced into some sexual act before even like the age of knowing. So I will have another video on that talking about it more in depth because all of these stages is there's so much to unpack from it that I know I'm gonna have to create a whole new series on it and just educate what that means and hopefully start some healing by the grace of God. So like if the intrinsic experience isn't hard enough, right? As I mentioned, lack of food and shelter, lack of knowing what having any form of security, if that's not hard enough, a lot of immigrants fleeing prosecution across the board finds the refugee systems very, very hard to navigate. So this takes me to the third stage of migration trauma, which is seeking asylum, trauma while trying to seek asylum. And basically just what seeking asylum means is you're seeking protection from another country that's more developed. Individuals who've experienced war, genocide, as we're seeing right now across the world, they're not actually protected. Stateless people are not protected. Just because war broke out, most countries are not going to go run to the aid again because their own they see their own civilians as what needs protection. So stateless people, they have to seek asylum for their own self through the refugee and resettlement process. And the resettlement process is extremely daunting. Mind you, a lot of individuals who are fleeing their home country knows their home country native language. Not every individual speaks French predominantly, or speaks European English or American English for them to actually be able to communicate with the resettlement people, right? This is where also brokers come in. Immigration brokers have done a great job of linking displaced family members with their relatives who are more abroad in stable home. Brokers, actually, from my research, it seems like they've been the ones who've been able to really help family members seek asylum than even the resettlement process, because the resettlement process requires a lot. My family went through the resettlement process and hired a broker, and from what I remember, for the seeking asylum part, we had to study our basically our history and our history in the truth. We had to study the history that my grandma wrote on the piece of paper when she from what she remembers when she filed for us. My grandma filed for us like in 2000. She filed for us, and it took about like 10 years before we were able to actually all be put together, study the history and what she said happened, and why we need the protection. So during the asylum process, the trauma comes from just the stress of making sure you're good enough for the host country, because host country are looking for specific type of immigrants. A, those who are able to work. B, those who are going to bring in kids that are going to be able to work. And C, those who are not going to be problematic immigrants. So most times that means single mom with a lot of kids, no dad, and they're going to offer you, a little bit of assistance, government assistance while you adjust. And then basically you're going to have to pay it back. You're going to have to pay everything they funded you back when you adjust here. Um, so yeah, that's the third stage of the migration process. It's the seeking asylum process. And there's a lot of lost identity that comes with seeking asylum. I will go into so much detail more in another video. I will go into more detail when I talk about just immigration identity in my upcoming video, but I just want to give a little bit of insight in why that seeking asylum isn't a cakewalk, because you have to make sure the story lines up for every family member. And I remember us having to study our new birthdays, our new last name, have to explain where our dads are, stuff like that. Even though you're a kid, you don't really know. It has to line up with everybody else, or else they'll assume you're lying. You don't need asylum, and you will just be denied. You'll be denied asylum. By the grace of God, again, my family was able to like get through the whole process, and then by the time I was 10, we made it here. But I remember it being super super stressful. I remember my mom and them making sure we knew the story like the back of our hands, and also making sure like everybody had the same energy of wanting to come to the US. I remember one time telling my family I dreamed we didn't come to the US. I remember everybody shunning me. And that's one thing I remember about the asylum process as a kid, because if a kid come back and be like, "I dream we came to the U.S.," like the adults will applaud them. And I was that one kid who was like, "I dream we didn't make it," and they're all like, "You always say mean things. How are you gonna ruin this for us? Your mouth." That's my first time hearing your mouth. But yeah, like the asylum process can be extremely stressful because you just want your kids to be somewhere safer than hearing gunshots. Because while in transit, mind you, which is the stage two, while in transit, I myself personally experienced having to flee two wars. And I'll go into more details in other videos, but I personally, at age 5, I had to flee. And I remember again, I believe it was like 7, I had to flee. And those two were extremely traumatic because my mom was not home and neither was my older brother. So you're in transit, hoping you can just figure our way into a country that does not that can take us in, because if you're in your host country, if you're in your homeland, there's a lot of war. Even if you move to another country, my family fled Liberia, went to Cote d'Ivoire. I was in Cote d'Ivoire until age 5 again, and then civil war broke out in Cote d'Ivoire on a random day when my mom was not home. And that was in transit process again, where I had to pick up my brothers up, and hopefully, by the grace of God, another neighbor helped me get to a refugee camp, kept us safe. And later on, they like relocated my mom, and we're able to like meet up in so we're able to meet up in a refugee camp and continue the relocation process again, and find another resettlement agency that can help us. So that's like stage 3 of the migration process, is the asylum seeking. But you could be seeking asylum while still in transit, right? And you could be seeking asylum and then still face pre-migration trauma from the new country you ran into. It is not just like, these stages are not, what's the word, linear. You could be in stage 4. Like right now, I'm in stage 4, which I'll go into, which is trauma in your host country. But anything can happen in the U.S. that can throw me back into stage 1, and that's for everybody to know and understand what it means to be an immigrant, because it could happen to any of us. Where this is not something that you have under your control. It's the power that be with your government, depending on how stable they are in making sure that people are safe. So while a lot of refugee organizations get the credit, get the donations for helping immigrants, a lot of the heavy lifting actually comes from like immigration brokers. My family had to hire immigration brokers to really help us explain how to craft our story and help us like explain the process in like again how to make sure all the documents line up, how to make sure all the family members are together. The broker will do a great job of relocating displaced family member and keeping the communication going between everybody. And I just want to personally thank the guy that helped our family out. I don't know his name, but I remember what they look like vaguely. I don't know how. So if you're an immigration broker out there, making sure family members are, are being placed in the home country, I just personally want to thank you for actually doing your work, because you guys are the reason why even my family were able to all be together today. As I mentioned, I have 10 siblings and we're all alive by the grace of God. So those brokers who have helped, please keep doing that, and please be doing your job right now because people need you. And this takes me into the fourth and final stage of migration trauma. But please keep in mind, these stages are not linear. Like, I really want to stress that they're not linear at all. But the fourth stage of migration trauma is trauma while in your host country. So once you've meet up the asylum seeking process where a country takes you in and say, yes, we're going to take Elizabeth and her kids, they set up a date for you guys to actually locate back into the US, right? And once you get here, there's a lot of things you experience as an immigrant that's even more shocking than the stuff you saw while you were in transit. Two of like the major concerns both US and Canadian task force have cited as to being like the biggest source of immigrants trauma while they're in the US and Canada is poor employment opportunity and poor living condition. Those two have been like biggest impact in keeping immigrants who come here from actually being stable and from actually thriving, right? Most immigrants who have came here, I know from my mom and her sisters. My mom had 9 sisters who migrated with all their kids. They're here for a specific employment reason. And when I learned the reasons why the US accepted my family, it actually made me broke down in tears during graduate school, because it just made so much sense while we're all in this cycle, even though we're in the US. Some host country will accept single moms and their kids because a single mom can work as CNAs and their kids can go in school for a little bit, and because again, they don't have a lot of resources, they're gonna have to go into the workforce early on. A lot of immigrants are here. We hear the immigrants are here taking our jobs, but these jobs are very low pay. These jobs usually don't have to offer a lot of benefits to these immigrants because they know they're in dire need. And these jobs don't come with a lot of security long term. And they don't feel the need to be respectful, because some of these immigrants, I know my mom and them, when they're here, it was so stressful because English is not their first language. So employers don't feel the need to treat them like human beings. They just see them as, working bodies who gets the bare minimum in pay and treatment. So that causes a lot of trauma, because when a parent have to work in an environment where they're fully disrespected, when they get home, they don't show love to their kids. When you're at work where you're not accepted, you feel isolated, your cultural food is not even accepted. You come home to your kids and you take that on your kids, right? So that's the first form of trauma that happened. That poor employment condition leads to the family being hurt, and then that causing like intergenerational conflict that just takes on for its own issue, right? And then the second one is poor living condition. Again, most immigrants who are here, they're living in Section 8, they're living in low income homes, they're living in, poverty ridden neighborhoods. Not all of them, but again, if they're forced migration, they're not coming to the best environment naturally. My family actually, we got accepted to come here to the Midwest in Minnesota. So imagine coming from West Africa, where the average weather is about 71 degrees, and migrating to the US. and experiencing your first winter where it might be up to negative 60 degrees. And then we lived in Minnesota for 2 years, and my mom couldn't maintain having me and my six brothers under a CNA paycheck. So again, she was encouraged migrate to Fargo, North Dakota, because they have a lot of great opportunities. Your kids can go to school and you can work, and like the cost of living is so low. So we moved even more north. Right? We move even more north. Now, instead of us living in Minnesota where all of our other families are staying, where there was just more of a camaraderie and understanding, we were one of the first immigrants to live in North Dakota. We're one of the first like black people to live here. And the culture shock that comes with that and the trauma that comes from that culture shock is something that you're gonna have to work on again, work on your identity for a long, long period of time if you don't have, therapists, therapists and clinicians who are appointed to help out. That's why I've been so passionate to be an immigration racial counselor. A lot of people tell me, why will you be so specific and niche when you can make more money, working with individuals who, people who have insurance, have access to wealth, and I can just do we call it in counseling the depression and anxiety work. But I understand even when we migrated here, that's something my family could have used. Having a counselor to check in on us, what's going on, what happened to you guys. That would have really helped that process if we had a clinician like myself who understands what it means to be an immigrant, understands like theories and tools that clients can like equip themselves on. But when we migrated here, we the most we got was vaccine shots, but there was no help in like the humanity side of making sure our home was afloat. The only time we have humanities people show up is when my brother accidentally um, told on my mom at work, and then CPS showed up. But even then, they didn't help offer counseling to teach my mom how to parent, right? And that puts fear in immigrants not to seek help, because if you seek help, they could take your kids away from you, causing more trauma in the household. Now, anything that goes wrong, you just internalize it. So in the host country, a lot of things happen, and most immigrants will let you know that that trauma is even more like sometimes even more deeper than what happened at home, because we almost like detach ourselves from what happened during the war. And you also have to do that because your identity has changed. My last name is not the last name I carry right now. A lot of identity was stripped away. So when you get here, it's almost as if you have to like shut down what happened during the war, shut down all those three stages of migration, so you can be adjusted more in the US, because the US come with a whole new ball game. When I migrated here, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I was 10 years old, but I didn't have any formal education while in the immigration process in Africa. So my first time entering formal education was in the third grade at age 10, barely understanding English, and I was just thrown to the wolf. And that comes with a lot of being in your head about if you're good enough, being in your head about just like how to navigate where all these kids have lived in the same house for all of their lives and know all of their friends, and you just not only don't understand English, but your home life is chaotic. Your identity has been stripped away. You understand when you go home, you're actually more of a parent than a kid. So seeing how kids move never makes sense. Now I'm just talking a little bit about mine, but yeah, those are the four stages of immigration trauma. And I just don't want to leave us on a sad note, like it's all bad, right? Because immigrants, especially immigrants in the US, from doing my research, have done such a great job with post traumatic stress, with PTSD. From what I've learned, post traumatic growth also take place, right? If the individual gotten the help they need, if the individuals are in a secure family, or just have church, have people around to help, post traumatic growth happen. Take a look around you. A lot of immigrants have businesses, especially in my hometown in Fargo. That's why I moved back from Texas. Like just seeing other immigrants who've been here for the last 10 years in Fargo open up their own businesses, seeing them like making sure like their culture is back in Fargo, seeing, my former friends who are all immigrants in Upper Bound, they're in the police force, they're in healthcare, they're in the STEM program. Post traumatic growth, that's why like we go through a lot, but also we want good for ourselves from what we've experienced back home. So I don't want to leave everyone just on a down note of being an immigrant is just all bad. It's not a walk in the park. It's not a cakewalk. It's not. You're gonna have to fight 10 times harder. for things most people naturally have, like knowing English. You might have to actually, you know, be in summer school longer. For me, I've been in school for the last 17 years since I've been in America. I just graduated with my master's in December. But before that, even during the summertime, I would be enrolling in summer school because I want to catch up. And by the grace of God, again, I've been able to like learn fast and pick up fast. But it's also been me having to make sure I do the work myself. My mom never went to school. I don't have a dad, so that's another topic for another day. But I've had to like learn that there's post traumatic growth and actually holding accountable for what I want my story to be. So now that I've covered the four stages of immigration, the trauma that can occur while in it, I just want to talk about some tools that clinician and individuals who are going through this, depending on what stage you are, can start utilizing to help their process. I would say one of the best therapeutic theory that I utilize with all of my immigrant clients is narrative therapy. Narrative therapy does so much because it puts the power back into the client, the individual hands on what their story is. And for me, I've been in counseling for personal therapy myself for the last 3 years and getting to write my story out. I even have my whole thesis based on my thesis is all narrative therapy, just flushing out my family story, utilizing that narrative therapy to like connect with my family members again that was strange really helped me understand like the power and just how strong I've been in going through this, right? So for clients too, my clients that I've seen for the last a year and a half and so during internship, God placed me in Texas. I was able to go there and follow my purpose to a T. Thank you, Lord. But when my clients saw me when they get a session with me, they usually just start crying because it's very, very rare to come across a therapist. There's 4% of therapists are black, and it's very, very, very rare to come a therapist who understands the process of immigration and the trauma that occur. So when clients come into session, I utilize the first 3 to 4 sessions, depending on what stages they're in, just for them to like talk about what happened, talk about it in whatever way they want to share it, right? I'll give you an example. I had a client come in, one of my last clients doing internship. She's in the US, but she's seeking a lot. She's still in asylum seeking due to just, I can't really share it, but just due to some traumatic events that have happened with her. And when she came in my session with me, usually what I ask clients immediately is to rate their anxiety. I just want to see where they're at and I want to get them to a good baseline, right? This client told me her anxiety was at a 10. I'm like, 10, okay, I can work with 10. That's fine. We started the session. I typically started with mindfulness just to get them to feel calm and safe and feel like grounded. And then I had her just share her story, like based on fully her perception of what happened to her, without me utilizing any tools, without me utilizing any CPT. This is just for her to like let it out because this woman had kids, right? We spent 5 minutes mindfulness, 40 minutes talking about her story a little bit, and I just let her carry it out, flushed it all out while taking some notes, knowing again what I'm gonna cover for the next remaining of time I'm working with this client. And then after her going through her narrative of what has happened, towards the end again, I said, okay, thank you so much for sharing as normal. What will you rate your anxiety right now? She rated a 1. I like it. She came in the session one as one person, and she left that session a completely different person. And that was the first session. By session number 3, she knew she wanted to be a lawyer. So I like it may sound like crazy that that could happen, but a lot of people just need a safe space to speak their truth. Healing comes from speaking your truth. And for a lot of immigrants, they've had to compartmentalize so much of their lives, even in their host country. Like when you're in school, you're not speaking your language, but when you're home, you have to speak your language. There's so much like acculturation going on that having one place where they can all meet, like therapy session, is very, very helpful. So I really want clinicians to be bold and brave enough to actually let clients flush out their story without them having any effect on it. And I also mentioned this, especially immigrants, we like to take care of people. So when they're in session, they need to know you're comfortable hearing all these stories. A lot of immigrants are scared that their stuff is too much to even handle because it's been so long. For some people who've been here over 20, 30 years, they've been living this way of life for so long. To have someone sit and listen to them, it's like it's rare for them. listen to the full thing. So I just hope as a clinicians, if clinicians are out here working with clients, be patient with them, but also encourage them to just flush out their narrative. There's so many different like techniques in them flushing them out. They don't just have to sit and talk. Because for even me, while I was in therapy for the last 2 years, my therapist, she was so good because I'm good. I like to use my hands. Have you guys noticed? I use my hands a lot. So my narrative therapy came with her creating a whole timeline on some piece of paper on her floor. She changed her whole therapy setup because she knew I like to move around, and I was able to like from 1996 when I was born all the way to like what was it 2019 in that session. We had a whole timeline for what I can remember, and like it did so much for me. So narrative therapy is one just for the first few sessions, and then I recommend now that they have those sessions on the narrative. I want you to go back in from the distortions you see about themselves. That's where you want to like bring out trauma focused CBT to start helping them see themselves differently, or see themselves at least in like a better light than who they actually see themselves as, right? I'll say those are like the two main ones I would start out with as a clinician working with immigrants. Now, there's so many other therapeutic like theories out there that I'm gonna go over. I don't want to make this video too long, but if it reaches people, I just want them to have something that will help. And if you're not able to afford counseling because it's so expensive, that's why I'm creating videos now, because I want to reach immigrants all over the world by the grace of God. I just want people to have access to it. Everything else that I receive is bonus from God. But for those individuals, those immigrants who do not have access to counseling, take advantage of this video and start your own narrative, whether through a journal. Handwriting out your narrative, I would say, is the best option because your brain cognitive does the work for you when you're writing with your hands versus phone. But if you have a phone, I would say still use that, whatever helps. But the most change cognitively comes from writing it down with your hands. Start with your story, like your birthday and what happened. Just create a little timeline, and then over time, and start filling it out more and more in details. I hope this video was helpful to anyone who it reached. If you got into the end of this video, which is going to be extremely long, thank you so much for watching the entire thing. What I would like from you in the comment is just share with me of the 4 stages of migration. What stage are you in? Are you in pre-migration? Are you in transit? Are you seeking asylum, or are you in your host country? And from those stages you're in, please tell me like how it's been for you. I really would like to connect with my audience more and just build more of a community here. This little this little side of the internet, I would love it to be where immigrants feel safe. I would love it to be where we can actually share not just our experiences but resources with others who are seeking help. And I will love this to be just a place of like connecting. And also for the younger generations, connect with your older parents, your older grandparents. They would love to hear someone interested in their story, because most of them have gone a long time not talking because they've had to work, they've had to suppress it. So for the younger generation, if you have time, I know some of us are hardened by our older generation, but if you can make time to sit and listen to their story, well, it's actually part of your story too. So that's all I want to share for today, y'all. Again, thank you all for listening. I've had this video mapped out for about a month or so now, but the devil kept trying to get in my head about recording it for some reason. And today God's like, you know what? Just record it. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not perfect at all, but still put it out there because there's people who could use it. So I pray everything it reaches who God wants it to reach. And before I end this video, also I just want to take time to pray. I want to pray for the immigrants out here who are facing displacement. I'm constantly on Al Jazeera seeing just how much destruction is going on right now in Palestine and Israel, how much destruction is going on right now in Europe and Russia. And it really have humbled me, understanding like more than ever, we need to pray for our people. So I just want to take time right now to pray for our people. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to tell you thank you so much for speaking through me today, Lord. I've been led a little bit by anxiety and fear of who this may reach, but also thank you for encouraging me to just come out here and do it because you're working through me. I want to pray from the people right now who are displaced, God. Every time I go online, every time I go on the news, all I'm seeing kids being kicked out of their homes, kids having to fend for themselves. I'm seeing family members being displaced, God, and I just want you to be able to reach them like you did me and my family, Lord. I just want you to be able to arrest their heart and remind them that they're not alone, God. God, during immigration, a lot of people ends up losing their faith in you, especially those who are born in war, who just inherited a lawless land. It makes them lose their faith. So if you can like arrest their heart, if you can put people in their heart, if you can put brokers around that will point them to you, God, please do that. Lord, I also want to pray for our governments right now. Our systems are so corrupt and it's causing a lot of people's lives, Lord. And you said that we're supposed to be obedient to authority, but it's pretty hard to be obedient to authority members who are not led by you, God. So please arrest their hearts also. A lot of people, you said we're supposed to inherit the earth, but a lot of people are inheriting poverty, they're inheriting illnesses, they're inheriting incest, and they're inheriting intergenerational trauma. So please forgive us, but also guide us as we're trying to navigate these stages of immigration trauma, Lord. Please guide us and be with us, Lord. I want to thank you for sending your son to forgive our sins. Please forgive the sins of those who are committing these crimes, Lord. Forgive the sins of those who are killing, who are fighting, God. But also arrest their heart that they don't have to move like that because it's not beneficial to anyone. These resources that's causing fights is not beneficial to anyone, God. There are people suffering all over the world, even those who are in US. We're struggling, we're at a very all-time low. So please arrest all of our hearts and remind us that we're supposed to be led by you. It's not about race, as I've learned. It's not about race at all. It's about being led by you, God. So please protect my people, or protect your people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for staying this long if you did. And I pray you and your family are safe too. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe if that's what you feel compelled to do. By the grace of God, just want to reach a lot of people who can benefit from this information. Again, you have a wonderful day.